Hey everybody, and welcome back to a Ready Steady Podcast, the Ready Steady Play podcast where we talk about board games.
I am here too.
In this episode 6, I am pleased to be joined again by Barry, the co-host of the podcast, who's also been playing some games that we're going to talk about.
Co-host? What an upgrade.
Upgrade from what?
I don't know. General lackey.
Well, do you know what? You can have the editor title as well if you like.
No, it seems like a lot of effort.
I'm giving it away, so come and have it. So we're going to talk about some brief news that we've seen, and then we're going to move on to the games we've been playing and talk about what we thought of them. But before we actually get into the news, I have one little apology to make. I had released last week's episode 2 days late, and
Shocker.
It was a shocking dereliction of duty. Actually, it was due to Adobe just deciding that it hated one of the frames in your video file, Barry. For some reason, one single frame was the worst, and it didn't want to render the entire thing because of this one problematic frame.
How bizarre.
I looked it up, and apparently people have been writing off entire projects because of these corrupted frame issues. I was very fortunate, apparently, that it was just one frame and not more. So, anyway, Adobe, a lot of people rely on that, and it's quite expensive, so, get it together. Come on. You're filling all of these apps full of AI, but, that's great and everything, but I still need to render the videos.
the most fundamental part of making the video.
Yeah, I can fill it full of AI nonsense, and then it won't render. What's the point of that?
Lols.
So, moving on to the news, I will mention first that there has been a new GameFound campaign launched for an expansion set for Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, which is the board game implementation of Europa Universalis, the video game from Paradox. And this is by Europa Universalis, is published by Ager Games. Have you played it?
I have not. I've neither played the video game nor the real-life game. I'm pretty sure somebody I know has it, and I do want to get a game organised. But that's an all-day event, right?
So, I mean, I think actually all-day event is inaccurate. Underselling it, yeah, massively. I think you need to have at least 2 or 3 TTS sessions to prepare to learn the game, and then set aside a day or 2. Yeah, put aside a weekend at least. I was actually, I was expecting you to say no, I haven't played it. I was going to come back with no one has.
Not the whole thing.
The only people who've played it have played it solo. We did play it on the show. We did 2 10-hour live streams to play through the basic scenario.
The tutorial.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, the tutorial... So the game does come with a tutorial, which I think is what most people have experienced, which does sort of hold your hand and walk you through it. And you can probably get through that in about an hour. But quite frankly, it is the bare bones. It's worth doing, but it doesn't teach you the vast majority of the advanced rules I don't want to call them advanced because that sounds like they're optional. It doesn't teach you the vast majority of the full rules.
Gotcha.
So it is worth starting with the tutorial, but you'll need another sort of session to expand outwards into the full game. And I think it is worth doing your homework if you're intending to do it, because it wouldn't be possible to explain it all up front, and it would be pretty rough to go in to the game and trying to learn as you go.
Gotcha. And then this expansion adds more rules, is that?
Well, that was where I was coming around to, because it absolutely doesn't. So Elvind is the designer, Elvind Vedelson, and he has heard your feedback. This adds no new rules. Right. It only adds new playable factions and cards. So it's sort of broadening the existing coverage rather than adding new mechanisms.
Broader, not deeper. That sounds reasonable for a game that already
wants probably intense. Yeah, if you want to play all 4 eras, you're writing off a week. So
No, I didn't know it was quite that bad. I'm sure they managed to get a game done in a day, but that could have just been the tutorial.
Yeah, that could be one era. You could potentially blast through 2 eras in a day if you started at the crack of dawn and everyone knew it really, really well. But I just think it's very optimistic. And
what's the point? What's the point of that stage? You know?
Yeah, well, exactly. Just set aside the whole weekend.
Yeah. Campaign for North Africa. That's
well, it's out of print, so you'll have to get Europa instead.
fair.
Right, Barry, you got anything for the news?
Yeah, like a couple of things caught my eye this last couple of weeks. The one that just recently announced was the founders of Reyvick. So that's not Reykjavik, but Reyvick, a fictional world of Richard Garfield's creation. No, that's not true. He's taken the world setting from a book, although I forget the name of that book. But anyway, Richard Garfield, who's made many wonderful games, Mindbug, which we've played, Netrunner, which I'm playing tomorrow, and as well Magic the Gathering, not to mention King of Tokyo and dozens of others. And this has been published by GMT, and he did a sort of little write-up of it on Board Game Geek. And this is a 3 to 5 player tile drawing, bidding, commodity speculation type game. The rules aren't published, I can't tell you everything about it, but it's set in this fictional world. I think you're actually competing for unobtainium, which is not an invention of Pandora and Avatar, but a sci-fi MacGuffin for anything that's undescribable. And you're obviously building up your area control and your commodities, and you've got to set the price for these commodities, and then this maybe isn't a great comparison, but have you played Isle of Skye?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
So when you put your tiles out, you set the price for them, and if nobody buys them,
then you get to keep them, right?
You've got to pay that price, or you've already paid that price, kind of thing.
Okay.
By the time it comes back round to you. So you put out, this tile I think is worth 3 coins, and if nobody buys it from you for 3 coins, you must buy it for 3 coins. So those kind of things where you set the price of the commodities you control, and if nobody buys them, then you have to kind of buy them for that price. And it looked pretty interesting. I don't know a huge amount about it, but he's obviously done a lot of games in his time, and this was something that looks a little bit of a departure from certainly the card games that I mentioned and the lighter sort of family games I mentioned. It seems a bit more intense, so something I'll be keeping an eye out for.
It says here, Founders of Reyvick is based on the economic theories of Nobel Prize-winning economist William Vickrey, as well as the writings of Eric Poisner and Glenn Wheel, especially their book Radical Markets.
Yeah, but there we go. It's an economic game.
But I know that Richard Garfield's card games often have very well-constructed, tight economies. I mean, I'm thinking specifically.
Well, he's a
about
mathematician
Netrunner,
as well, right? Similar as same as Knizia, I'm sure.
So that will be an interesting one to check out for sure. I'll keep my eye on that. And it's from GMT as well, which is
GMT. So that gives you an idea about what how heavy it is. Not that every GMT game's heavy, but it's not his usual family affair for some of the games, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect lavish production and approachable component design. But
it doesn't look too bad. There is some pictures up of it. It doesn't look amazing, shall we say, but it looks very serviceable. And I think I said last time, GMT are better with their games than what they used to be back in the 90s and noughties, or whenever they were publishing the original sort of Twilight Struggle and stuff.
They have been getting better. And for what it's worth, what they lack in maybe lavish production, they make up for typically in interesting mechanisms and quality design. So I'm pleased I'll be more than pleased to explore a Richard Garfield game that they publish.
Nice. What else you got for us?
Before we move on, actually, just a very quick note here. It says also that this is for 3 to 5 players, so hopefully some some interesting economic argy-bargy player
like
interaction.
three players there are a few 2-player auction style games, right? But they're not. They typically fudge some things. Like you need a third player for any real auction where one player controls a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Like if you're setting the price and the auction's only against one other person, who knows?
Yeah, it depends if somebody's going to be the auctioneer, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, you've got sort of two fundamental mechanisms. One is the Isle of Skye, where someone's the auctioneer and everyone else is bidding, or you can have like Ra, where there's a sort of a central auction and nobody's really the auctioneer. I know when you call the auction in Ra, you become the auctioneer, but you're still bidding on things. You're not selling anything.
Played 3 or 4 games of Ra in the last couple of weeks. It's good.
Yeah, likewise. I've never had any problem getting Ra to the table. It remains excellent. Next up, I've got I just got a few notes here on the current campaign, HEXplore, The Mountains of Godai, which is the 5th installment of the HEXplore series. Have you played HEXplore, Barry?
Not only no, I don't even 100% know what it is. So let me have a quick board game geek of that.
It's sort of a fantasy adventure character building game. It's cooperative or solo. And the original HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King, was crowdfunded. They've been crowdfunding new chapters ever since. Each one iterates and adds more mechanisms and things like that. And it gets sort of increasingly complex as the series goes along, I suppose. It's designed by Kat Kimuchi, Jonathan Luz, and Nathan Luz and Jonathan Mariucci. And when the patrons on Ready Steady Play asked me had I played it and would I look at it, I reached out to Jonathan, and he very kindly sent me a review copy of The Valley of the Dead King, as well as the Forests of Adramon. And I played The Valley of the Dead King through solo, and I actually did a sort of a report back for the patrons about that experience, but it's not up on the channel. It was one of the very few pieces of Patreon-only content I've done. So, mainly because I intended to do a more formal review once I had a chance to play the Forests of Adramon, and then I got too busy and I never did. But I do intend to go back to it at some stage. But it's not a short game. It's a long adventure game. And the sort of core premise is that you've got this sort of player board, which is like a character sheet, and you will write on it in dry erase marker. So like all of the components are dry erase, and you can write on anything, which is kind of fun. So you're like sort of making notes and tracking your stats and upgrading things as you go and writing everywhere. And it's kind of great. In that respect. There's loads of different combinable classes and races and things, and so you can really be quite dynamic about what you make, and it's pretty free form. And it's got, so the Valley of the Dead King specifically has this sort of function, or that very typical sort of overground fantasy adventure game trope where at some point a big bad boss is going to spawn, and that's going to be the game timer, and then you fight it and you either win or lose, and that's the game. My understanding, so in the Valley of the Dead King appears eventually and chases you around until you fight him, and either you win or you lose. In Forest of Adramon, I believe they actually changed it out for a fortress that you have to assault at some stage, and I think as the games go on, that premise actually becomes more opaque, because it looks like in that premise becomes less relevant because they change out the game mechanisms. For example, it looks like in the Mountains of Godai, as you are wandering around the map, because it is about exploring a hex map, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not just a clever name. The Mountains of Godai has this function where you are harvesting resources from the map and then building towers which are going to defend against oncoming waves. So it's like a tower defense game with waves of minions that will spawn and rush the map, and they need to be defeated by these towers that your hero is setting up as you adventure around the land, which is cool. Like I think that sounds great as a premise. And I think that, if you're into the HEXplore series, then you'll probably get a kick out of that. In terms of how the actual boxes cross-pollinate, it's just classes and races. So you can pull the class and the race out of any box and combine it with a class or a race from any other box. So all of that's fully cross-compatible, but the actual sort of maps and enemies and things are all very specific to that game. And that's partly, I think, because the mechanisms change over the course of it as well. Yeah. There might be some classes that are game-specific if they use mechanisms from that game specifically, but definitely the races are all cross-compatible. But my experience with the Valley of the Dead King was not like great. I got off to a really bad start, and I was like, okay, well, I really want to just reset this because I'm going to struggle. And there's a lot, it's very dicey. And at the beginning, it's got that whole, like, you're a level 1 goober. So, you need like something to pick you up, or you need to succeed at something. And I just kept failing everything I was doing. And I was on this clock when the Dead King would show up. And I was like, oh my God, and you can add time to the clock by sort of doing different things around the board. But, I was like, I've already stuffed this. But I was sort of like, I'm going to persevere anyway, because I want to see how this experience plays out. I need to know the game is failable. Yeah. That's important. And then I just pressed on and I failed forwards and upwards, and I actually ended up winning that game. Well, it took too long, and the other thing was that the particular combo I picked, I think I was like a half dragon sorcerer or something, right?
Sounds cool.
Or it might have been like an angel-born sorcerer. I think that's what I was. And it was cool. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a powerful angel-born wizard, and then a sorcerer. And then it's like, oh, you just tripped over in the ruins and you lost all your stuff. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to be, the comedy relief in this setting.
Yeah.
But the thing was, there was a tipping point about halfway through the game where I'd leveled up my core spell to the point where every combat was just the same. I was just executing the same steps repeatedly. Yeah, okay. And so it got incredibly repetitive. And so it kind of lost me there, And I can put up with that repetition, I think, when the setting's dynamic. Because I'm thinking back to when I played Gloomhaven, and I was the starter wizard from Gloomhaven, one of the more complex ones in base Gloomhaven, who recovers all the burnt cards. And I sort of had a setup as well with that character. I'd sort of set up this powerful combo by playing the same sort of cards, and I'd typically follow the same sort of methodology. But because I was playing with other people, and also the dungeon was quite dynamic, I didn't feel like that ever got repetitive. Whereas here, like, I really noticed the repetition. And I feel like the combat might have been more dynamic in the 2-player game as well, because there was sort of a system for targeting, and you could use like sort of free actions to change who the enemy was targeting. But because I was playing true solo, all of that was irrelevant. So I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm definitely going to go and try out Forests of Adramon because I was sent a review copy. But I think if you're a fan of the series, this looks like it adds some really cool new mechanisms and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if you're looking for a jumping in point on HEXplore it, I don't think this would be it. That's
stick with the core, see if you like it.
So, yeah, or I don't know if I'd pick up the core either. I think Adramon might be the best place to start, just because I think the core's a bit rough. Like, I'm hoping they'll have polished some of the issues I had with the core in Adramon. But, it might fundamentally still be the same sort of thing. And also then maybe not the best solo experience either. But, if you're playing 2-player, there's a lot more going on, so it's less of an issue. And that's HEXplore at the Mountains of Godai.
Nice. I got a couple I'll just jump into quick here. Mostly because I don't know a huge amount about them. One thing that popped up on my Instagram was a new post from Asmodee on Tree Society. And the thing, most notable for me is there's another Dunstan and Gilbert game right? So I think we could almost have a dedicated section just to Matthew Dunstan and Brett Gilbert on the podcast now. They do so many games, it seems. But there's not a huge amount of info on this Tree Society. Your blueprints and building and resources, and that's kind of all that was announced about it. Might be seen at Gen Con, which isn't too far away, right? When's Gen Con? Is it just before? What do you call it?
Essen. Yeah.
Fair enough. So not much info about it, but and I'm a little hit or miss on some of the Dunstan and Gilbert games, but I do enjoy Village Rails. That's a good one that I play quite often. So I'll keep an eye on it, and if it's similarly sedate and fun to build something, that might be a good one. And then another one, I played Horrified for the first time at the Games Expo.
Yeah, I've never had a chance to play it.
If you've never played it, I don't know, it's not particularly for me. It's fun, it's very light, you're just moving around collecting things to fight monsters. You need certain resources to be able to beat them, and there's loads of different monsters and they all do slightly different things, but each game has been standalone so far, because I think actually Ravensburger, who published this, were somewhat surprised by its popularity, and so they've made these other versions, which was American monsters and like Universal monsters, classic monsters, but now they've got Horrified World of Monsters, and this is the first expansion. Now it's a standalone expansion, so you could just buy this, but it integrates with their newest one, which was Greek, and older versions have specific things to the monsters in the game, whereas Greek and this World of Monsters are the blue monster or the red monster type deal, right? So certain icons relate to monsters independently of being named, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it looks like they're trying to turn it more into a series. I think, as I said, they may be a little caught off guard by how popular it was. And now they're trying to be like, well, okay, now we're going to release expansions. You'll get extra monsters for games you've already got, for example.
Okay, right. So they're sort of developing the system.
Yeah, like that's it. It's becoming a system much more so than just a independent game. Much like, I don't know, Unmatched or Dice Throne or something along those lines.
Yeah, because we've got that crossover of horror fans and board game fans on Ready Steady Play. Largely my doing, thanks to the Halloween excursions into horror video games. I do get a lot of people telling me I should play Horrified. I've just not had the opportunity.
I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't play it regularly.
What about if you're really into
It's too light
horror?
a game to be something you want to, get good at. But it's a good family weight game, although the theming, of course, may put some people off. Now, those are the things that I've seen. However, I have broken, you may recall from a couple of previous podcasts, where I've been adamant I don't want to buy more junk. By junk, I mean more board games. Unfortunately, I caved just this week and bought a couple of things that I've not yet had a chance to play. And so my niece and nephew were here last week, and looking after them is very, very boring. So while I was doing that, I ended up purchasing a couple of board games. The first one of which was Brazil Imperial, or Brazil Imperial, depends what you want to say it. And this was the trigger to buying something, because I was on Facebook, somebody said that this was a good solo 4X. I was like, sure, sold. Immediately bought it, didn't do any research. I've since had a look at it, and I'm not 100% sure it's going to be the game for me, but we'll see. So this is a game designed by Z Mendes. We also did World Wonders. Have you played World Wonders?
Yeah, I did actually. I played it a bunch, and I think I've talked about it in a video I haven't put out yet because I'm so backed up with editing. But yeah, World Wonders. Takeaway was that a pleasant little tile placement game, scales well at the player counts shown in it, overstays its welcome a little bit, and also the wonders don't feel quite consequential enough. But the polyomino aspect is reasonably satisfying, and it's got quite a tight drafting at the core of it, which is pleasing.
So, I said, that was quite popular. I was like, okay, I'll give a shot of...
This is quite a departure from that.
Yes, it's a very different game, right? But
much heavier.
Also, it's published by Meeple Brazil, Meeple BR. I wonder if they'll have to change their name thanks to Handsome.
Thanks to the litigious Handsome Gluck.
Yeah.
Selectively anyway. Litigious.
That's a bit of insider board game jokes. Well, not insider board game jokes, but if you know, you know. So anyway, I was sold on it as being a solo 4X. The only 4X I've got is Twilight Imperium. And so I thought, well, I could use a smaller one. But then I've looked at the reviews now, and a lot of people comparing it to Scythe, and I'm not a big fan of Scythe. And there's a lot of queries about some of the balance in the game, and so I've not played it yet. Hope to play it soon and see how it goes. I believe you've played it. Perhaps we can discuss after I've given it a go.
Yep, absolutely. I have a copy of it. I bought it at some stage when it came out originally. I have played it at 4 players just the one time, but I would. So yeah, we'll wait for you to play it, and then we'll have a chat about it on the podcast in due course when you've had a chance to play it. But I would say, to alleviate your fears about the Scythe comparison, the feel is quite similar when it comes to like sort of optimizing your actions and trying to get the most mileage out of your actions each round, but it's a lot less futsy. Like Scythe it feels to me like more futs than the value you're getting out of the game.
Gotcha.
So this feels more streamlined and tight than Scythe, so that's nice.
Fine. I believe the extermination aspect is also underwhelming in this, but we will.
Yeah, much like Scythe, the 4th X is a bit underdeveloped, I suppose. Yeah, for want of a better term.
But then it was, I needed to get to like 50 quid for free shipping, so I thought, why not buy another game while I'm there?
Just a cheap one to make up the extra money, right?
Just a cheap one, just a little one, something to throw in. So I bought Inventions, Evolution of Ideas, the new Vital Lacerda game, published by Eagle Griffin Games. And this is fairly new, right? I think the Kickstarter delivered, or the game, the crowdfunding delivered quite recently, and I did manage to pick up the promos and the extras with it. So just to keep just nudge it over that 50 quid mark. Now, what might surprise you, like I don't own any other Lacerdas, and I was like, I really should play something. I really should have one, but I've actually never played a Lacerda.
Okay.
Not played Kanban, not played the Gallerist, CO2, Weather Machine, On Mars, Lisboa.
There's so many.
Yeah, there's so many, and they were all on my list to be played. And I just thought, surely, I feel like that's the kind of game I'm going to like. Like, everybody talks so highly of them, and I just feel like there'll be a lot of fiddling around with stuff and trying to optimize things, and I just think it'll be good. So I've not played that, just arrived this week, and I only got rid of my. I only parted ways with my nibblings earlier in the week, so not had the chance to play yet.
Are you intending to play Inventions solo as well, or multiplayer?
Well, I mean, I'll give everything a go solo just to learn the rules, right? Is the best way in. But no, like I've not bought either of them specifically for solo. I think the 4X solo was interesting to me because I don't have any other games that kind of fits that kind of feel. Whereas something like Inventions, I don't know if this is going to be the case or not. But something like Carnegie solo is in there, and I've got lots of other games that are proper heavier games that you can play solo. So I don't think this is necessarily one that I may only want to play solo. But no, the intention will be to play multiplayer to begin with, at least.
Well, Inventions is one of the few Lacerdas I haven't played. I have only played Weather Machine in its prototype form on Tabletop Simulator, but I've played all the others? Yes.
Well, you own On Mars at least, right?
I own On Mars. On Mars is I've actually still got my copy of Escape Plan as well. But On Mars is the only one that I sort of intended to keep. escape plan I've only kept because I'm bad at organizing sales.
Yeah, fair.
But I mean, I'm in the camp that I like Vital's games. I think none of them are are really bad. But I also feel like, particularly with the sort of the later titles, they're sort of the puzzle, the actual puzzle of the sort of the management aspects of the game feels very, like, it doesn't feel distinct enough that I'm like, I want to have more than one of these.
Gotcha.
Having said that, I wouldn't mind. I could probably expand up to 3 because I do think the Gallerist is really good, and I do think Lisboa is really good. And On Mars is also probably the heaviest. So it's... having said that, I haven't played Inventions. So, maybe
people are saying good things about Inventions and, that, or Kanban, or potential standout ones.
I'll try to... I know someone who has a copy of Inventions, so I'll try to get a play in myself, and then maybe on a future episode we can... we can get back together and we can discuss your experiences, and I can talk a bit about where I think it sort of fits into
the broader Lacerda verse.
The broader Lacerda oeuvre, yeah.
Nice. So those are games that I've not played. What about games that we have played?
Well, I'll start with something small. I know you've played this too. I played the expansion to Furnace Interbellum.
Yep.
You actually taught me Furnace. I came back with a review copy from Essen, and that was wonderfully provided by Arcane Wonders.
Mm-hmm.
And Furnace is designed by Ivan Lashin, and it's a little engine builder game. So it's four rounds.
Yep.
And each round is 2 phases. The first phase is a card auction, and it's bidding on cards with these little tokens. You've got numbers 1 through 4. You can put out whatever number you want when it's your turn to bid, and if you put the highest number, you win the card. You can't put 2 bids on the same card, and you can't put a number that's already there. So there'll always be a winner, and everyone else who doesn't win will get some compensation issued by the card. And so everybody bids on these cards, going round to round, placing 1 token at a time. Then all the cards are distributed to players, and then you slot them into your engine, which is a row of cards in front of you. And if you are playing what they call the beginner mode, you can slot the cards into this row anywhere you want. And the cards are going to...
babies.
And really, the cards... There's lots of sort of little things that they do, but fundamentally, there's 2 important things. They produce resources, one of the 3 kinds of resources. The only 3 kinds of resources that matter in the whole world: coal, oil, and steel.
The barrels.
That's oil.
Oil. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I assume it's oil. Barrels of stuff.
They're yellow. I've always thought they're radioactive, but that doesn't make any sense.
I think it's a bit before that.
I think I've played too much Power Grid.
Yeah. So the cards either produce the resources or turn the resources into money. And money has no real purpose other than it's the points at the end by which you win the game. And so, to an extent, it's about making sure you can churn through these resources, turning them into money before the end of the 4th round. And if you're playing on this sort of beginner mode, you can slot the cards anywhere in the row. If you play advanced mode, you can only put the cards on either end of the row, so to the left or the right, and you place them one at a time as you acquire them. And that is my preferred way to play. I've only played the beginner mode once, and I found that everyone got sort of really AP about optimizing the row, whereas when you restrict people to just 2 choices, they make their decisions a lot faster. And that's one of the nice things about Furnace, because it's really fast. The game is like 30 minutes, maybe 40 if you're playing at a higher count of players, and all of the actual operation of the engine, so the second phase of the round, is all simultaneous. So you do the draft, everyone gets the cards, puts them in the engine, runs the engine, next round. And so it sort of really scratches that resource production, engine building, combo building itch in a record time. Have you played Interbellum?
I've not played the expansion. I bought the expansion when it came out, because I've been playing a lot of Furnace, and then I don't know, like it just hasn't got to the table really since. With the, I think I played it once since, but we didn't bust out the expansion, so I did have a look at what it adds. Trying to remember now, though, it's a little tricky.
Well, let me tell you about it. So, the Furnace expansion is the base game 5 players. It is, right? It goes up to 5. Or does the expansion add a player?
The expansion adds a player. There's definitely only 4 discs.
Yeah. So the core game is 2 to 4. The expansion adds a solo mode, so you can now do 1 to 5. It also adds another player. The expansion adds 2 main sort of two new big new elements. There's a minor adjustment where it adds some new cards for the auction, and that's nice to have new cards and more variety. And the new cards have instant powers, so when you win them in the auction, they do something immediately, which is different and nuanced. Because one of the core conceits in standard Furnace is like, do I actually want to win this card, or am I just bidding on it to get the compensation for losing, which is quite important part of planning your engine. It's good little dilemmas in record time. So but one of the things about base Furnace is that very often people will just throw out their big 4 token straight onto the card they need. They're like, that's the one I need to make this engine, really good. So I'll put my 4 there. That's my first move. And then every other move, I'll put out the 1, 2, and the 3. And hopefully maybe I'll win another card. Maybe I don't even want to. Maybe I just want to get compensation. But the tension is sort of lost after the immediate first round of bidding. And the other 3 rounds of bidding are just kind of like whatever. And so one of the new mechanisms that Interbellum adds is that you have another dial, a 5th dial. And that dial's numerical value is equal to however much coal you want to spend. So when you place the dial, you spend an amount of coal, which you must have, to set the dial to whatever number. It goes up to 9 maximum. So that's really cool. It means there's never like sort of a safety position in the bidding. And you can always be outbid on something if somebody has coal and wants to outbid you. Of course, you can scout the table and go, oh, nobody's got 4 coal. I'm safe this round. So anyway, that's one of the cool new mechanisms that it adds, is this extra dial for bidding. And then it adds a second marketplace, probably to help make use of the fact everyone's got another dial now. And this marketplace adds 3 new cards. Well, they're not cards. They're called managers or assistants. And the premise is that they're sort of people that are going to work for you, because each card is like a capital asset. It's a factory or something, or a mine. And so now you can hire managers to go and work in the mines and the factories. And what you get is this little cardboard token that has a benefit on it. Like, for example, the exchange on this card can be triggered another time. So if the card lets you turn coal into money twice, now you can do it 3 times. Or it might say, like, the exchange on this card counts as fulfilled once already. So, you just assign that to a card and you can do a free transfer on it. So lots of little passive niceties, nothing too complex, but you can bid on those as well. And they have compensation as well if you lose. So yeah, I think Interbellum's actually a really nice little expansion. I think what it does for the drafting phase is really good, and sort of helps to make it a little bit more exciting and a little bit more tense in that phase. And I don't think that the overhead in the engine running phase is problematic. But I only play the advanced form. Maybe if you had more options for optimizing your engine, the extra rules grip might just push the game into the overstays its welcome bracket. But I can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, what you just mentioned there with the baby game, the baby version of the game, actually thinking back for the first couple of games where I did do that, yeah, like things dragged on with people trying to work out the best way of putting their things down. Whereas, yeah, it's a lot more. Sure, you put your resources on the left and your conversions on the right, but some of the cards with resources also have conversions, and we'll get them in time. Or can you get those resources from the auction in time to trigger them? I like Furnace's auction mechanism quite a lot, just the outbid part, and the addition of the coal because often you could have a time where you're generating a lot of coal, and you can actually, I guess, use that to your advantage now to turn it into either winning more factories to convert things or additional resources to convert in your factories. So that was pretty interesting. No, I really like Furnace. I think it's really quick. I like the auction part, and I like the engine running part. It's super straightforward. You get a lot of satisfaction from running an engine, and it really does ramp up in those 4 turns. Like if it went to a 5th round, it'd be way too much.
Yeah, it definitely. I think I would highly encourage people to play the advanced mode, even straight off the bat. I think it makes it easier, not harder. It makes the decisions a little more of a dilemma, I suppose, and it's probably a bit helpful if you've played before and you understand how the engine's going to operate. But that's quite teachable up front, and furthermore, it's not especially complex. It's a pretty light game, so I don't think it's going to flummox anyone particularly, especially if they're familiar with the hobby. So yeah. It really scratches a little itch, and I think it's a great little light game, and Interbellum is a nice addition.
Nice. I want to play it now. Let's have a think. We played a game, Mike.
We did.
Rare when we get a chance, but it was online, to be fair.
Yeah, it was your worst of all worlds. It was on BGA and it was async.
I enjoy BGA. I have no problem with that. It's the asynchronous nature. This wasn't too bad, actually, but the games where it just drags on and on and on was horrible. In fact, I played Distilled async, and it really showed the problems with the game. I think I bumped it down half a point after playing that in terms of ratings. But anyway, we played a game that's not yet out, in real life at least, and that was Grumblestone. So this is a game designed by Josh McBride, published by Blue Fox Games, and is coming to Kickstarter, not crowdfunding, at some point. I don't know when it's actually going to be, the campaign's going live. There's no live date on there. So this is a family weight.
This is patchwork with punching.
That's what they should call it. Yeah, like that is a pretty good description. They should have that as the tagline for their adverts. They can
quote me on that. If they want to put that on their campaign page, I'll allow it. that quote.
To get an idea for how it plays, it's a family weight 2 to 4 player currently, dice chucking tile placement game. It's not really a dice chucker, you roll some dice. Tile placement game, and players take on the roles of golems attacking each other. Not golems, but golems attacking each other. Players have a 6x6 grid with icons on it, and they roll 2 standard d6s, right? 6-sided dice, which you assign one of the numbers to a row and one of the numbers to a column. So 1 to 6, top to bottom, left to right. And then every icon that's activated in those row and column, you use to do something. So that you can attack, you can defend, you can heal, or you gain resources to buy new polyomino tiles that form a market like patchwork, which is kind of where we're saying patchwork with punching. You take those tiles, you add them to the grids, and that improves your rows and columns, and eventually you'll unlock a power-up unique to your golem when you complete your first row or column, or a super power-up when you first do both. And basically you keep rolling dice until one player runs out of health, and then the other players, whoever last golem standing's the winner. So this game's still being developed, with promises of a solo mode, which is why I said 2 to 4 currently. The co-op boss battler mode, more golems, and actually a 5th icon ability, which unclear what is going to be yet. So I've played 3 or 4 games, 4 or 5 games maybe. I think it's fun. It's a lightweight. It's easy to teach. It's easy to play. I think it's a better 2-player experience than something like King of Tokyo, at least until King of Tokyo Duo comes out later in the year. And for what it was, I thought it was a lot of fun. Like, it's definitely fun on Board Game Arena. Do I want to be faffing about with it in real life? Hard to know until I see kind of what it looks like properly. And I also lost because I misread how many shields Mike had going into that final punch. And I didn't mention the dice mitigation. You can sacrifice health to change some of the numbers up or down one. I sacrificed 2 health to move one of my dice numbers down, which I thought was enough to kill him, but it wasn't, and then left me vulnerable to the counter punch.
Yeah, counter punch.
Yeah, it was asterisk. In real life, I wouldn't have made that mistake. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I don't know what you thought about the game, but I think it was.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a really nice little sort of polyomino dice rolly situation. I don't know how. I mean, at 2 players, it's very binary. You punch the other person and buy more tiles. I like that there's an alternate victory condition where if your opponent has built some kind of really tanky golem, then you can win by completing your grid, which really benefits the people who are good at planning out grid completion, which is not me. So I will just have to win by punching.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how it would function at multiple player count or at higher player counts, because I suppose it would be a free for all.
Yeah, so you can assign each point of damage individually.
Yeah.
And so you bring down all your opponents at roughly the same rate, right? The same kind of balancing mechanisms that something like, Magic Commander, their multiplayer version has, or Dice Throne, or what else has that? I think Dice Throne's a good example where
but I don't like. I really like Dice Throne. I don't like it at more than 2.
I never minded the multiplayer. The version, if you attack the person with the most hit points, you get to draw a card, and so they're incentivized to not go after the weakest player.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's what I mean. So it's sort of, this is a problem, right, that is being recognized by the designers of Manny Tremblay, the designer of Dice Throne. So, they've added that incentive to encourage dissemination of attack damage, not just pick on the loser. And I wonder if Grumblestone will have a similar sort of mechanism to encourage you. It would be very easy, like have an extra shield if you attack the big guy, or
just an extra money to buy another polyomino.
Yeah, exactly. There'd be lots of ways they could approach it, so that'll be interesting to see.
Well, it's still in development, it seems, and there's other things being added, so...
not yet on crowdfunding, so still very early on.
It could even be... whatever that 5th icon is, could be interesting.
So I got to play Fateforge, which is a new adventure game from Mighty Boards, designed by Gordon Kalea.
Is that the one we played?
Yeah, that's the one we demoed, yeah. So I played through most of the first chapter. We had to stop right before the giant thrilling climax. I was disappointed to not get to see how the first chapter ended. But this is the full production copy. We've got an early copy from Mighty Boards that we're playing and enjoying. Fateforge is a cooperative adventure game. I am the Enchantress, who comes from the expansion, actually. I think I've mentioned in an earlier podcast that Fateforge was sort of billed by the publishers as Gloomhaven for people with jobs, because it's supposed to be faster and punchier and quicker to play and easier to save and put away and quicker to set up. And to an extent, that is accurate. Except there is a major key difference between this and Gloomhaven, aside from all the obvious differences, which is all of them. It's a fantasy adventure game. It's cooperative. And it's campaign, and that's kind of where the similarities end. But there is a huge amount of rote narrative in this. Gloomhaven doesn't have the adventure book. It really is all about the puzzly dungeons, and that's it. This is very much about the adventure book and following the story. And right from the outset, it starts giving you choices that seem to have repercussions. I'm not sure how diverse the branching paths are, because we've only been through this one session one time, but I would be I would hope that they would be quite diverse, and I'd be keen to check them out. But the game itself is structured in the format of chapters, and each chapter is divided up into sections, and those sections are typically sort of exploration sections and fight combat sections. And they will be interspersed with these sort of moments of respite as well. And you will have to try to make your hit points and your stamina, your basic stats, last across multiple fights until you can get to another moment of respite to recover all of your health and damage. If you've played Vengeance, which is the previous game designed by Gordon Kalea, then the fight sequences will be very familiar to you. If you haven't played Vengeance, I will go into a bit more detail about that in a minute. But it's an app-driven game, so the app has the story in it, and you will, however you want to play it, take turns reading the story out to each other or whatnot. But you'll just be making choices as a team and going through the story. You'll maybe arrive at an exploration section where you are exploring a city, a map of the city, which has micro-macro flavor. So you're looking around. It's not going to be obvious. Like, you're going to arrive at intersections and things like that where it's like, do you go north, south, east, or west? And you actually have to look at the map to try and work out what's on the map, where are you going to go, that sort of thing. And then if you've successfully navigated to where you need to be, then you will get to trigger the next scene. And I don't know what happens if you get hopelessly lost, because we didn't do that. But I'd be keen to find out how the game copes under that pressure. But do you just wander aimlessly until you eventually arrive where you're supposed to be? Or does something else happen? But then you'll go into these fight scenes, and it's set in this fantasy world. Fateforge is a known RPG world by a company called Studio Agate, or Agate. They publish all of these Fateforge books, and it is, I don't know anything about it. I only know about the Fateforge board game adaptation. But it is, sort of fantasy. There's all these different fantasy races. It looks like the setting feels very fleshed out. It's probably because they've got all of this RPG lore to draw upon, which is great. So, you really get a sense of different factions and different peoples and different sort of relationships between the peoples and things like that. And it's not just sort of generic elves and dwarves and they hate each other sort of fantasy tropes, which is nice. It does have a little bit of fantasy
name-itis.
Yeah, fantasy. It's got a little bit of fantasy.
Over what it actually says. And we went to where we met. Oh yeah, that.
So it does have quite a lot of fantasy jargon. It hits you hard with a lot of, really specific fantasy names early on. You're not required to memorize them. You don't need to know what they all are. They do serve the purpose of making you feel like, there's specificity in the world, and they have, the characters have like knowledge about what's going on and stuff like that. It's not like you've got amnesia and you've just woken up. You feel like your characters are part of this world and they know sort of what's going on. They are a little bit sort of like fish out of water, because you're from the primal forest where the sort of fairly primitive people live, and you've come to the big city to solve a problem. But that's all the plot I'll give away, because I don't want to do too many spoilers. But yeah, the fantasy names they have included, they are pretty janky. Like, it's quite a lot of jargon. So you do have to stop when you're reading it and be like, what how do I pronounce this?
Does the app not read it for you?
No.
Or are we not there yet? Yeah.
There may be foreteller. There may be narration coming. Backers haven't got their copies of the game yet, so I don't know. I don't know any of that. We were just reading it aloud to each other at the table. The app does have music, which is nice. So it gives you a little bit of music, and it changes it up based on what you're doing as well, which is cool. So the fight sequences are very much an evolution of the system that Gordon Kalea used in Vengeance, which was, Vengeance was the the revenge movie board game. So it was all about going out and murdering a bunch of goons and then killing a big bad goon who probably also murdered your family or kidnapped your daughter. So that system now here deployed, doesn't quite have that same sort of thematic grounding, but it's still a very exciting system, and it does make you feel like a cool badass. And you do get to run into these sort of environments and beat a bunch of people up and, accomplish the mission. It does make the game, the game feels very visceral. Like, because you don't get a lot of hit points back right away, you can feel like every hit point matters, and getting punched can, it feels bad. Like you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So that's really nice, and it makes the combat feel like important and exciting. And so you sort of alternate between these story moments and these fight moments. And the board for the fights are relatively easy to set up. Like it is tiles, like classic Gloomhaven, so there is that futz of looking for the right tiles and stuff like that. But all told, like setting up the tiles and resolving the fight scene probably takes all of 60 minutes. So they're pretty fast and pretty brutal and quick to resolve. And then you'll get to these moments of respite where you will sort of be at a point in the story where your characters have a chance to recover and recuperate. You'll get to spend some of the loot that you've acquired to acquire new loot or train up your characters to get some more skill cards, which improves their abilities and things like that. And fundamentally, the combat's sort of controlled by this dice system, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at the moments of respite, you can also recover your hit points and your stamina and things by paying for it. You can also do these side quests if you want. And that introduces a little mini game as well, where your characters have skills that you're rolling against. And if you're trying to do things that you're good at, then you will have a better chance of success. And very amusingly, in one of the side quests we came upon, my character, the Enchantress, whose skill is Insight, was called upon to make a medium insight check, which I failed twice. And so we were sort of picking sides. We weren't given an option to get the full story. We just had to pick the side we'd got. I feel like if we'd maybe passed that test, we might have been given some more information that might have helped us get a fuller picture. But instead, we just wound up going into this fight scene on one side, and then that sort of visceral combat suddenly felt a lot more like, oh, are we doing the right thing? Is this okay? Like sort of morally ambiguous. Like, oh, I really wish I'd passed that insight check. So that was kind of cool how the sort of the context of the world gave that fight a new sort of, the context of the story gave the fight a different sort of feeling. So that was cool. So overall, so far, I've really enjoyed my time with Fateforge. I hope that it's robust enough to carry the interest throughout the course of the entire campaign, which I believe is to be about 20 hours long. I'm not sure how many chapters there are.
Europa Universalis.
Half a game of Europa Universalis, yeah, exactly. So we must have, to be fair, we were figuring out the rules and going through the tutorial and things like that. And hopefully there's an option to skip the tutorial parts, or at least the tutorial sort of hand-holding if you ever play again, because that's kind of baked into the start of the application. But yeah, we probably played for about 3 hours and we got through most of chapter 1. So if it's 20 hours long, then there's going to be 6 or 7 chapters probably. So we'll see. But
I enjoyed the demo, but it's, as I said, I think I said last time, it's just not a game that I want to be getting into. If I had a whole nother room for games, maybe, but there's only so much shelf space I have, and there's only so much time. Buying a game, as I've discovered, is not giving you time to play a game. And so it just wouldn't make it to the table for me. But I enjoyed the system, and I think it would be a lot of fun with the app and I've played all the micro macros for finding things. I want to do that bit,
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is for a regular group who can get together, and play it. So we're playing it 2-player. It's me and Mark Dainty from Not Board Gaming. We're playing through 2-player. I think that's a manageable
If he's not from
count.
board gaming, what's he from? Hey.
But just in case you're interested, here's just a little bit of nitty gritty, but I won't go into too much detail. But the way the combat actually works is that each player gets 4 dice. And each character has a set of dice that's their default. And you can get better dice if you get weapons and equipment later on, or if you get better skills, you can get better dice, but you will always swap out a die, so you'll only ever roll 4. And at the top of the round, you roll 4 dice. These are hidden behind a screen, possibly because if they weren't, people were collaborating too much, or coordinating too much, or it was reducing the efficacy of not the efficacy, but the sort of the rapidity of the fight scenes, because they are very rapid to resolve. They're quick to go through. And so the dice are hidden behind a screen, and then you're allowed to communicate as much as you want once you've rolled the dice. But you have to say, you can't explicitly say what results you've got. So you can say, well, I can go into this room and I can deal with these people and I can punch those things over there, or I can't go very far this round, or maybe I might go over there and deal with this thing, or go over here and open this chest. And there's also an advanced mode, which says once you're done what's called the preparation step, which is this rolling and sort of resolving your discussion, you'll go into the action step, where then, the final moment of the preparation step is to pick turn order. And then you'll be discussing who's going to act first and who's going to act second. Because within the turn order, there's 2 steps that have to be included. An enemy reaction, where a small number of enemy tokens will do a thing, and that's going to be randomized by the app. And then there's the full enemy response at the end of all of the turns. And that's where every enemy token is going to react and do something. So the enemy reaction step will alternate, so you might have both players going before it or after it or on either side of it, and it will be even more dynamic if you're playing at 3 or 4 players, because you'll have more potential positions it could be in. But you must decide who's going to act first, who's going to act second, and the app will tell you before you choose, so where that enemy reaction is going to take place as well. And so then you move into the action step, and then the player who has gone first, or if enemy reactions is first, you'll resolve that, and then go to the first player, and they'll resolve all of their dice. So they'll do all of everything they're going to do, and then you'll proceed through this sort of this turn structure. And the dice themselves have basic actions on them, like shoot into the next room, or punch someone in your room, or cut them up, whatever you've got going on, or move around. And then also you can use combinations of these symbols to activate your equipment as well. So you've got like a sword or a shield or something that'll turn a pair of symbols into some cool combo. And that's about it, really. You just you go through the room, you've got some objective. It might be to recover a token, or it might be to kill a specific enemy, or whatever. And then and then just rinse and repeat, really. And that's the combat.
No, a lot of fun.
So I'm excited to play more of that, and hopefully we'll put some gameplay of it up on the channel at some stage. So come along and check that out if it takes your fancy. And that will have to have some spoilers for the beginning of the campaign, but lots of different choices in there anyway. And that's Fateforge. Designed by Gordon Kalea, published by Mighty Boards.
Very cool, very cool. I played another game on Board Game Arena, something that I'd had my eye on for a little bit. One of my friends was supposed to buy it. They thought they pre-ordered it. Didn't come. I don't know what happened. Anyway, it's on Board Game Arena, and it is Vale of Eternity. This is a game designed by Eric Huang and published by Mandu Games, I think. And if you've not seen it, it's a combo-driven, light medium weight game of card drafting and action sequencing, where you're looking to gain points through the best interactions of those cards that you have. Kind of like Fantasy Realms or Red Rising, if you've played those, but I do like this better than both of those games. But it's the same kind of principle. You've got sort of a few different types of cards, so like suits or colours, where you snake draft going round. So if you get a first pick, next person picks, and then if there's only two of you, they'll pick again and you'll get another pick. And after you've chosen which cards you're wanting to take, you can either pick it up, put it into your hand, or you can sell it for resources. But that's the only way of getting resources unless there's combinations on the card. So you can't just play all your cards. And the other thing that stops you playing cards is you can only play as many cards as the round that you're in. So if it is round 4, you can never have more than 4 cards in front of you, regardless of if you had some way of paying for it. So it's clever. There's a bunch of sort of take that, well, not a bunch of take that, but there's some take that where you want to take out other people's combo pieces, or even remove your own cards to make space for other cards you can pay for. So some cards will give you immediate benefit if you can get rid of them into something that's an ongoing combo piece or an ongoing resource generator. You might want to take out your own cards to do that. And then there's some clever combos in there that feel really good when you manage to pull them off. And there's nothing, super intense in those. Like, everything's on those cards, but the way they come together makes you feel quite clever, and that's the good thing about those sort of engine building and combo building type games, I find. Now I've played this on Board Game Arena again because, like I say, the physical version didn't arrive, and I was told it was a seasons beater, right? I don't believe that is the case. I enjoy Seasons more than Vale of Eternity, but I do enjoy Vale of Eternity. Vale of Eternity is quicker. You can probably play it in half the time as well. It's quicker to get set up and into and understand what you're doing, and you can play it quicker as well. I think maybe half, 3/4 of the time to get there. But I'm not going to swap my physical copy of Seasons for it. And actually I just played some of the Seasons expansions properly for the first time and still enjoyed them a lot. But Vale of Eternity, you're either working whoever's got the most points at the end of 10 rounds, or whoever has first person to get to 60 will trigger the end of the game. And the couple of games that I had were interesting. The first one was just a slow incremental gain of points as we were going through it, and the game ended on turn 10 with both of us kind of going over 60. And the other one I had nothing going on because the combos that I had were waiting for a really explosive turn where which required cards in hand, and I could combo them out for free and pick the card that I could combo with back up and play it again. And I had like almost no points going into round 10, and then I got like 64 points in a single turn. Maybe not quite that many, maybe like 50 of the 60 odd points that I got were on this last turn. And it was just interesting seeing the sort of two ways of going about the game, and it was all based on just identifying those combos in hand, sitting on them for a while. Like my first turn I generated no resources and just sat on both cards because I thought I could combo them off for more points later, and that's exactly what I did. And it was really interesting. That's what you want, different ways of approaching the game, identifying those combos and playing them out. Have you played this in real life or online?
No, I haven't had a chance to play this one actually.
Really, really easy to get going. Like exactly what I said. There's 3 different resources, which is the interesting part of this game. Well, not the only interesting part, but an interesting part of this game. Reds are worth 1, blues are worth 3, purples are worth 6. You can only ever have 4 resource tokens. If you ever have more, you have to discard down. Unless you get the totem, which lets you have up to 6. Anyway. But and you don't get any change. So if you spent a 6 for something that only required 2 reds to play, then you don't get the 4 change. Managing your resources is interesting. Deciding what cards and what order you're going to play them. When do you get that immediate effect? When do you have to sell a card for a resource because you're going to play a better card from your hand for potentially. You can't ever sell cards from your hand for resources, so it always has to be generated from that round's picks, that round's drafts. if you're going to have that money. But you can be sitting on money, play one of the cards from your hand, or play one of the cards that you've picked, sell the second card that you've picked, and then play a card from your hand with the resources that you've generated. And so that whole sequencing element and the whole combo element, it is good. I just don't like it better than Seasons.
Right, so if you've never played either, go check out Seasons, but if you've played Seasons to death, maybe check out Vale of Eternity?
I think they're not actually that comparable in the grand scheme of things, other than the card-driven engine building element of it. Like, there's other games that are similar, but I was sold on this. I was like, okay, I need to get this played because somebody said it was better than Seasons, and I'm like, I really like Seasons. I've got to give this game a go, and yeah, it is good. And I definitely want to play it more, and I definitely want to play it more online because it's really fast.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to get me to. I don't see myself playing 50 games of this and wanting to play more. Whereas, I'm 100 games deep on Seasons, just on Board Game Arena, not including real life plays. So, but other people will enjoy it because it's much more straightforward. Seasons, you have to plan ahead the 3 ages. Here, you're just planning ahead with what you've got, or you can't even plan ahead because you don't know what cards you've got.
So it's quicker to play.
Yeah, it's just quicker to play, and it's less. Not that Seasons is a long game either, but it was fun. Vale of Eternity, very good. Give it a go if you get a chance.
All right, and that's designed by Eric Huang and published by Mandu Games.
Correct.
So I got to play Huang, which is from Phalanx Games, and it is the reprint of Yellow Yangtze. And I can confirm now that I've definitively played it. It is the exact same game.
Right. No differences?
So, fundamentally, no. The board is the exact same. The rules are the exact same. Everything's the exact same. It is Yellow Yangtze but they've added in probably the bits that they weren't going to or never had a chance to publish in the original printing of Yellow Yangtze. So what Huang does have is the 5th player, so you can play up to 5 now. It's got a bunch of modular expansions, so you can play with some bandits, module expansion. You can play with the Great Palace modular expansion. That's the only one we put in, and nobody ever built it because it's impossible to build. And I guess probably the biggest and most significant one is it's got a system called the Period of the 18 Kingdoms, which is an alternate board. So that flips over, and instead of playing with the blue pagodas, you have a series of granaries that can be captured by building kingdoms around them. And you want to bring those back to your commanders. If you know nothing about this, that is going to sound like gibberish. But look, I'm not going to talk about Yellow Yangtze too much. It is, probably the most complex tile laying game from Reyvick. Knizia is Tigris and Euphrates, and Yellow Yangtze is like his little brother. Huang is a reprint of that. And Tigris and Euphrates is horribly out of print and difficult to find. Yellow Yangtze is even harder to find because it was a much more limited print run, but now it's acquirable again. That is good. There should always be some version of this available, and quite frankly, they should have reprinted Tigris and Euphrates as well. It certainly feels distinct from these two, which are the same game. I guess I don't need to keep my copy of Yellow Yangtze. I can sell it now that I've got Huang, but I wanted to get Huang because I quite like Phalanx's productions. I think that they're good, and I wanted to get the extra bits, and there's an opportunity to get a neoprene mat, and I've started buying a lot less. Well, I do for games that I love, and I love this game. I love the other 2 versions of this game. I wish there had been more Kickstarter bling. That's kind of where I'm coming around to, because they originally put standees in the box. So you've got these commanders, right, which are the leaders that you put out on the board. And in the traditional games in the so I have the FFG version of Tigris and Euphrates, which is possibly the least nice one, but that's fine. I don't mind. I've got a copy of the game. But it's got plastic commanders, which is a pity. Yellow and Yangtze has nice wooden tokens. And in Huang, by default, they were going to do cardboard standees with the hexagon bases, which are quite nice. But they also did like a deluxe miniature set, which had all the gray plastic and was horrible. And then they were, by popular demand, forced to produce the wooden tokens. So I'd already backed the deluxe set. So then I bought the wooden tokens, and now I have 3 versions of the commanders.
Right, yeah.
So I can pick which component I like the best, and I picked the wooden tokens, although I think the standees are nice too. I think the miniatures could be nice if someone painted them, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, maybe one day I'll get someone to do that. I don't know. I like the wooden tokens. The wooden tokens are fine. I did use the miniatures for the pagodas, because the game comes with... You get the plastic pagodas in Yellow and Yangtze. In Huang, by default, you get 2 pieces of cardboard that slot together to make a pagoda. If you got the miniatures deluxified version, you get little plastic houses, and I like those. Those are fine. It would be great if they were beautiful wooden pieces, but that was kind of the point I was going to arrive at, which is that I really wish they'd done like a hyper gross, overproduced like edition. And when I say hyper gross, I mean actually it'd be great if it was beautiful. Like a wooden board and loads of wooden pieces and things like that. Like this, it's gone to sort of classic game feel. This, and I would have gone big into that. I mean, I think if you're gonna bling anything, bling the game that's been in print for 30 years and everyone agrees is brilliant. Disappointed. I mean, I don't think it's been quite in print for 30 years, but you know what I mean. And also, Tigris has been out of print for a while, and Yellow Yanks is a bit different. But my point is that I was a little underwhelmed by the actual Kickstarter delivery, which had 3 versions of the same component, and then lots of opportunity for nicer components that they just didn't produce or offer. Which I totally would have bought because I love this game. Anyway. That's fine. Huang is great if you like Yellow and Yangtze. It is the exact same thing, so if you've been trying to get a copy, now you can. If you want to get Tigris and Euphrates, it is not quite the same. It's not as heavy. It's lighter, but it's also available. So that's Huang. I'd play it anytime someone wanted to play it. I'm always happy to play it.
I've only played Tigris and Euphrates. I've never played Yellow and Yangtze, and my problem with Tigris and Euphrates is I learned it on the app, so I probably don't know it good, if that makes sense. There's a few games I've learned via apps and then I've not been... It's different than when you learn it in real life, I think, or when you play it in real life.
So I used to go down to the university actually in London, where I had a couple of friends who were students there, and board games on an evening. Actually, you joined us one day for DI with one of them.
Yep. Another good game.
But we played Tigris and Euphrates, and one of them had played 100 games on the app and had been really playing the app and had never played in real life, so requested I bring it. And I brought it and I taught it and we played it, and they were like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I think it is... And just to that point as well, I lost that game of Huang horribly because I committed to a war that was totally not in my interest just because I wanted to see the chaos. It was really dumb, but I had a great time. And always happy to play that.
It's all you can ask for. Nice. I finally got around to playing... Have I talked about this? The side quest 7th Sea. Did I talk about this actually playing the game previously, or just that I picked it up because you wouldn't give it to me?
Yeah, I think you mentioned you bought them, but I don't think you've played them.
Yeah, fine. So, I played it now. It is side quest 7th Sea, designed by Jacob Caban and Bartosz Idzykovsky, and published by Board and Dice. So this is an escape room style puzzle game, and has a little bit of a table presence because you build up the play area in the box. Like you've got bits of cardboard that sit in the box, similar to DV Games' Detective series, if you've ever played that. But basically, you put the cards into the box. So the box sits in the lid, and then bits of cardboard sit in the gap, showing a diorama, right, or something for you to kind of look at. So this is a new system. They've also got the Nemesis and Frostpunks coming out in this line of games, or in this system of games, and so they seem to be leaning into other board game IPs or tabletop IPs at least. And the system here is that each puzzle solution requires you get a 4-digit code, and that could either be based on colour, it could be based on a number, or based on a symbol, which are on these little bits of cardboard. So different lengths of cardboard that correspond to those numbers, symbols, colour, piece, and then you line them up from the puzzle you're trying to do, and they line up, they have a sort of beginning and end, and where it ends is where it gives you the solution, the number to the solution, and then that gets you a new card which has a new puzzle on it, kind of deal. Mm-hmm. So the main part of the puzzle was good, right? There's a number of things you've got to go through, escape room style, puzzle style, where you've got to look at the different areas and solve what it's asking you to do, looking around the different parts of the board, and looking at the images to solve them. And then at the end there's a big climactic puzzle, not to give too much away, and that was far less enjoyable. Like, it put a bit of a dampener on my overall enthusiasm for the system. But there was another problem with the system, that it doesn't seem to be particularly robust. So one of the puzzles required that we solve it by finding the 4 colours, except the 4 colours were given to you at the start, and then you had to try and figure out where they went. However, what I realised after doing it, because I initially got the puzzle wrong, but it didn't matter what order you put those 4 colours in, you would get to the exact same number. So if the puzzle solution was blue, green, red, yellow, it doesn't matter what order you put those on the solution bit, you'll always get to the same place, because the way that the bits line up are always the same, if that makes sense. So as soon as you've identified, in a puzzle like that, as soon as you've identified the parts that need to be on it, it doesn't matter the order. And so this was one puzzle where I know I definitively got it wrong, because I looked at the solution afterwards, but I still got to the right answer.
Right.
Which was a little unsatisfying. At the time, in fact, I think I noticed it as soon as I'd done it. I was like, wait, this doesn't seem right, but we've definitely got the right next card. So I don't know. I don't know if that occurs in other scenarios or other of the boxes either. And the theme for this one, 7th Sea, which I believe is a big RPG license as well, right? Some similar to Fateforged, has this thing, non-existent. I knew nothing about 7th Sea going into it, and I still don't. If they paid anything for that license, it was an absolute waste of money. It was so generic that they definitely shouldn't have even attempted to brand it the way they had. So I definitely enjoyed it as a whole. As I said, this final puzzle, the problem I had with that was you get one go at it. There's 5 steps, but you get one go at it, and if you get it wrong, there's and there was a bit of guessing, if that kind of made sense. Like, I didn't see how I could have figured it out particularly. There was a solution in the end, but did that. But overall, the build up to that was really enjoyable. It was just the final climactic part of it that was less enjoyable, and I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than Alley Cat's Unfold series. And actually, I hated Alley Cat's Fate Flip as well, so I think I'll avoid their puzzle games in the future. But I do want to play Nemesis and Frostpunk when it comes out. I don't know if you have Nemesis to not.
I do. Yes,
either.
I can. I'll actually get around to playing these, and then I'll send you the Nemesis one.
All right. Very kind. So no, I enjoy escape games overall, and this was fun, but some hang-ups about where the series might go.
Fair enough. I mean, I saw them demoing the Frostpunk one at UKG, but I can only assume that it's going to be marginally less miserable than the actual game, because it's, I think, a little bit more family-oriented, this series. But we'll see. I played Cascadero, which is the new tile, and if you're not watching the video, I'm doing inverted commas around tile, version, the new tile-laying game from Reiner Knizia. So this was published by Bitewing Games via Kickstarter, and there were 2 games together, Cascadero and Cascadito. Cascadito is the roll and write, which I also bought for some reason that I don't know because I don't like them. But Cascadero is the bigger offering, and I got it to the table and I played it. We played at 3 players. It goes up to 4. And it is based around this premise of, on your turn, you put out, and the reason tile is in inverted commas is because you put out little figures. They're little heralds or something. I mean, the game is completely abstract and utterly themeless. There are little heralds, and they're making their way between different medieval towns. And if they arrive at the medieval town in the right shape, you get to step up a track. So the way the game works is that on your turn, you put out one of your little guys and on the board, and that's it. Put out a guy on the board, that's it. But this could trigger advancing up tracks, which could trigger bonus actions, which could cascade a little bit.
Cascade, that's in the name of the game.
Yeah, but I do wonder if that's intentional, because there's not that much scope for like big cool combos, And honestly, most of the cool comboing is you can step up a different track. So there are 5 tracks, 1 white generic track. Each one is supposed to be associated with some kind of civilization thing. So like there's an economic track and a grain track and I guess a culture track. I don't really know. I don't even think it says their names in the rulebook. It might, but we didn't take it in if it does. But each track is associated with a city on the board and also with a player color, with the exception of the white track. So in order to win the game, you need to have the most victory points at the end of the game and also be at the top of your track. If you didn't make it to the end of your track, you can't win. And I do generally quite like that mechanism. I like it in Gugong, and I like it in other games that have used it, which elude me. So the game will end when somebody runs out of all their pieces or somebody hits 50 points. And there's also these achievements in the middle of the board, which award you points. And these achievements are like, first to join up 2 blue cities, first to join up 2 pink cities, first to get, so far up all of the tracks. When you get the achievement, you immediately grab it, and then you get to score some points. And some of the achievements, the ones about connecting up the cities, are all public. Sorry, not public. They're all public. They're all public goals, but some of them are non-exclusive. So everyone can do it, and you just claim it when you've done it. And there are some that are exclusive, so it's a race to be the first one to do it. But you've got to create these sort of certain shapes next to the cities. So like it's like one herald, one of your guys shows up at the city, and the city are like, we don't know who you are. Can anyone vouch that you've actually come from the king? So then you place a second piece down, and then everyone's like, well, that first guy's already brought the news. We don't care. So that city basically will never care. So what you have to do is put your second piece down next to a city that you weren't already next to. And if you can accomplish that, then you can move some spaces up the corresponding track. There are also road bumps along the track, certain spaces you need to jump over, and some spaces you want to land on exactly. So you're trying to get exactly the right number of movements on the track rather than getting too many or too few. And all of this sort of like managing the tracks, the bonus actions, and accounting for the achievements, it had a little bit of like Calico vibes, right? Not in terms of like, diminishing opportunities, but there definitely was that aspect as the board filled up and people put their pieces out and there were less opportunities for things. But just in terms of like the sort of the sheer weight of one decision, right? Like you're just putting out this one guy or this one little meeple, but the amount of choice in that placement was tasty. It was excruciating. It was good. I liked that a lot. Where the game kind of faltered for me was towards the end, where it was actually pretty close. We had one player who'd got a big lead by scoring well on the tracks, but me and the other player came right up from behind because there's a big 10-point objective that we were both able to score. And so we were all in the mid-40s, but it still looked like the player who had the lead was going to win. And that was because at that point, all of the objectives had been done. And there was no obvious way for me or the other player to score points other than advancing up the tracks, because at certain milestones, they had points. But we were so far away from those milestones on the tracks we hadn't advanced up that it was pretty transparent about 10 minutes before the end of the game that there was no coming back for us. Whereas the pink player who was ahead, they'd focused more on the tracks and also a little less on the objectives. So they still had some objectives they could score and also some scoring opportunities on the tracks. And then they just kind of closed it out and won. And so it really faltered and lost its steam towards the end. I was a little disappointed as well because I did at least like 2 of the 6 exclusive objectives and all of the public objectives. And it's not that I didn't win. I don't mind not winning. It's just that next time I don't really know what I could have done better other than go up the tracks better. You know, like there's not a lot of sort of like obvious player interactions. You're certainly not negotiating. There's tons of capacity to block, but the need to sort of, because it is definitely a race game, right? Because the minute someone hits 50 points, it's over. Or when you run out of pieces, it's over. There's no end game scoring. So whatever you've scored at that time is your score. And I generally really like that stuff. But, you know, you want a race game to be tense right up to the end. And that's the real challenge of designing them because, you know, at the same time, you don't want to have catch-up mechanics that feel kind of like lazy. So if there's too much rubber banding, then the main bulk of the game feels pointless. You might as well just jump to the end, you know. But if it's not tense at the end, then it feels like a bit of a, you know, it feels like it's run out of steam, you know. But this one, it felt really like it ran out of steam because it was just really obvious from the position of the 2 players who weren't in the lead that we were also not in good positions to get points. Mm-hmm. And maybe next time I'd play a bit differently, try to get onto the tracks in different ways. But I just kind of felt like the fact that there was no points that could be scored on the board directly, and you had to manage these tracks, that just felt like a step of admin, sort of abstracted admin that I just didn't really like.
The shame that the first part of what you described of the game sounded really good.
Yeah, and there's an alternate board side, which I'll definitely give a try. I'll play it once more at least. But I just think like when you could be playing Yellow and Yangtze or Through the Desert or even like Ingenious, I don't know why you'd pick Cascadero.
Yeah. I don't know, like Knizia's putting out
or Babylonia. Babylonia is great as well. Sorry.
No, just saying, like, the Doctor's putting out a lot of games right now. And you got to wonder how he's always done this, right? Where he's latched onto a theme and he's pumped out a ton of games in a short space of time. But there's been some winners and some losers, and there's always one gem in there, but you do have to wade through a few things to find it. And so this could just be that case. What was Cascadita? Is that the small one?
Cascadero is the small one, but that's a roll-in, right? It's a very sort of different affair. Now, the other one that's sort of notable, I think, is Rebirth, which is just finished on crowdfunding, because it looks like the similarity between these two, Cascadero and Rebirth, other than the proximity of their release, and they're both around Knizia, is that on a player's turn, they place one tile onto a board. So it looks like he's sort of got two sort of different designs within that space that he's been exploring. You know, this separates it from like Yellow Yangtze or Babylonia, where you have a hand of tiles, and it feels more familiar to Through the Desert, where again you're just placing one tile, albeit it's a camel meeple. But you know, but Through the Desert has just been republished by All Play. The new edition's nice. The hollow plastic camels it came with weren't great, but they're certainly sufficient. But if you did get the gross Kickstarter edition like I did, you can have the nice wooden camels. And that's really pleasing. So I think I'll probably just bring Through the Desert next time. Although I will give Cascadero one more go with the alternate board and see if it feels sort of better on a second play, but I'm not convinced. And you've been playing a game that people can go and see, haven't you?
I have been playing a game, yeah, so a quick plug. I'll not go into the ins and outs of it, but decided to put out some more board game content. I've got about 50 YouTube channels, each one different things, right? Whether it's a Netrunner one, Lord of the Rings one, whatever. But this one is Board Games with Barry. And I'm sure Michael dropped me a link down there. And I've just been throwing up a couple of bits just now, but been playing the daily Turing machine on Board Game Arena. Now, you may notice I've been playing a lot of Board Game Arena because the other games I've been playing were Haba games, where you got to stack hedgehogs on top of crocodiles and move around and pick a train tile with my young nibblings. But doing Turing Machine, it's a logic puzzle game designed by Fabian Grudel and Johan Levitt, and a decent backing of algorithms, published by Scorpion Mask, who also do Decrypto, another game I like. And I've been doing the daily puzzle, not every day because sometimes I'm busy, on Board Game Arena to try and solve it. And actually today is a great day to plug me because I did it in 4, which is the best I've ever done. 2 less than the computer in that one, but it's a game where you've got to identify a 3-digit code. You do it by checking various rules, which is the Turing machine, and the fewer guesses you can do it in, the better. So if you like Turing machine and you don't mind just watching me scratch my head for 5 minutes at a time while I'm trying to figure out what is this number, then you may want to go and check out the channel. I was thinking about doing Daily Dominion as well, but then I'll just expose how bad I am at Dominion, so I might not bother.
Is there a Daily Dominion puzzle?
Yeah, like on the Steam app, there's a Daily Dominion.
Oh, nice.
I rarely win.
Well, one of these days we'll live stream some actual competitive Dominion.
Well, not if I'm playing, but...
But, subscribe to Barry's channel so you can catch up with that stuff, and subscribe to Ready Steady Play.
The intention is to do more, but I start many of these things. Don't get too excited about it.
Well, if you want to see Barry do more, then subscribe. He'll be encouraged by number go up. It's very rewarding.
Number could even be like, I don't even know if I've got a single subscriber yet.
You do? Because I'm subscribed.
Wow.
So I'm going to get through this next one real quick, and then I'll talk a little bit about the last thing as well, and then that'll be the episode. Nice. I played War of the Ring, the card game. Have you played it?
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I'll discuss after I hear your thoughts.
Good. So this is from Ares Games, and it is designed by Ian Brody, and this is a review copy that Ares Games gave me at Essen. And I got a little pack of promo cards as well to go with it. It is, titularly the War of the Ring, the card game, but it is, in practice, Quartermaster Lord of the Rings. So if you know Ian Brody at all, you'll know the Quartermaster games that he's designed previously, which are all about logistics of war. And this takes that same sort of system and reskins it for Lord of the Rings. And that's that Lord of the Rings trilogy thing. That's the only thing it has in common with War of the Ring, the game. This is possibly just Ares Games tapping into their War of the Ring assets and the sort of overall IP of that Lord of the Rings IP subset. But anyway, in the game, it is a 4-player game. You can play it 2 and 3, but it definitely wants to be 4. And when you play 4, you play what's called the Trilogy Scenario. And the game is 4 decks of cards, 2 good guy decks and 2 bad guy decks. So the 4-player game is 2 teams facing off against each other. Sauron and Saruman versus the Aragorn deck and the Frodo deck. The Aragorn deck contains all of the Dunedain cards and also the Elf cards, while the Frodo deck contains all the Hobbits, all of the Wizards, which is like good Gollum, Ents, and Gandalf. And it contains the Rohirrim, and then it contains the one dwarf from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. A single copy of Gimli.
A single copy of Gimli. There's 2 dwarf cards in the whole game, Gimli and his axe. And what you're doing effectively is you are going through rounds of the game trying to sway the various battles of Lord of the Rings in your favor. And this is the context of Lord of the Rings is abstracted into battlefields, which are the major battles. So you've got, Minas Tirith and Helm's Deep and Minas Morgul and stuff like that. And then you've got also these path cards, which are calculated a little like battlefields, but these are representing the journey of the Fellowship or the... And so you'll place single characters into the path and whole armies into the battlefields. And the characters that go on the path will fight off against evil characters, typically Nazgul, facing off against them. Case in point, if you're playing the Saruman deck, you have no cards that can be played onto the path because Saruman never met the Hobbits, and when he fought the Travelers, it was at Helm's Deep. So there you go. But fun to, and there's quite a lot of like sort of little exceptional rules that are thematic choices, which I really appreciate because it makes them very easy to remember and easy to implement, which I'm all about. It is like the kind of game where you read the rulebook and you're like, oh no, and then you play it and you're like, oh yes. And it's these 4 decks of cards that each player has, and over the course of the game, you're going to be playing out characters, playing out armies into these battlefields. You've also got events that can trigger benefits and items you can equip to characters as well, but you're always going to draw too few cards, and whenever you play them, typically, they get eliminated from the game. Sometimes they can go into your discard, and sometimes you'll get a special event that will allow them to go into your discard, which will make you feel great, because eventually they'll come back. But very often they just get eliminated, and they just go out of the game. And so it's about trying to win as much of this as you can before you run out of cards or the game ends. And ideally, you want to still have some cards left when the game ends, because you will run out of steam and you'll shudder to a halt. And that's where you can really see the inspiration of the Quartermaster games, which are all about sort of managing the logistics of war. So I really liked this. This is the second time I've played. The first time I played it was at the UKG when it was first revealed. And I got to play a 4-player game, and we put poor Michael on the evil side, and he had what I think is the hardest deck to play now that I've seen the game properly, which is the Saruman deck. I think that's the hardest deck to play, and poor Michael was totally overwhelmed. Meanwhile, me and Chris just crushed and won in like round 3. So I hadn't really played it fully, but there's definitely like an ebb and flow of scoring as well, because at the end of the game, whoever has the most points is the winner. During the game, there's a victory check at the end of each round. And if you are 10, if there's a deficit of 10 points between either side, that side is declared the winner during the victory check. So you want to try to keep close to your enemy, or at least not let that gap get too bad, which again adds to this excruciating sort of management system where do you go in on these big battles, Or, do you try to save up your troops? Managing them correctly is really important. Ideally, keeping characters in reserve so you can give them cool items and stuff and shore them up is great. But you might not have time for that, because if the group gap gets too great, someone will win. And that'll probably be good. Good comes out the gate really strong, and evil kind of has to build up their sort of powers. But towards the end of the game, as the ring bearer moves closer to Mount Doom, and as the battles move... Well, actually, the battles are kind of abstracted. You're doing really out of order. But the point is that typically these things get easier for evil as the game goes on. So good is doing a little bit of a race against time as well. Evil also gets to draw more cards every round, which helps it shore up over time. But you've played this and enjoyed it?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with your assessment of, good coming out strong, and then the bad guys having to catch up there. I think, and what you're saying there about the battlegrounds being abstracted is important, but the paths, so the path deck obviously follows sequentially.
Yeah.
And so that kind of keeps the story going. But sure, you could have the Battle of Helm's Deep early on, and then you don't get to Rivendell until near the end with the battlefield. So that does lose a little bit there, but the way the decks work, it makes.
I suppose that is sense. One of the other things it has in common with War of the Ring is that it is Lord of the Rings, but sort of weird. It's like Lord of the Rings from the multiverse, a different timeline.
Exactly, everything plays out differently. But I found the path deck keeping things on there. So I've played it at 2-player, 4-player, and definitely 4-player is the way forward. Sure, 2-player theoretically works, but I'd almost argue that you just want to play two-handed at 2-player rather than mash them together, which is the way it suggests. And it's a game, the first time I played it, this is okay, and then played it 4-player. It's like, okay, this is decent, and then played a bit more and got a little bit better at it, and controlling the paths is the crucial part. So there's a couple of character cards that are able to control or flip forward onto the next path. You can have a path battle mid-round and then accelerate that, and as the Fellowship, you kind of want to get to the end, because that's when you can destroy the ring effectively.
This is another really nice thematic twist, which is that at the end of the actual round structure, everyone will play actions until they're allowed to pass, which typically means you've got a couple cards left in hand, but maybe you've played all your cards. And there's some actions you can do without cards in your hand, but that's typically moving stuff around in your reserve. But the point is that after everyone's passed, you'll resolve the combats, which will be typically one battlefield and one path, but could be multiple battlefields if somehow extra battlefields have entered play, which could be the result of cards, because all the cards have unique functions on them, as well as the capacity to contribute to battles and or paths. But unlike the battle, because the path is representing the journey forward of the Fellowship, if you add a second path card during a round, you must immediately resolve the combat of the first path card. Additionally, and this is the nuance I really like, is that if you add a further path card, then you get to pick it. So if you reveal it at the start of the round, it's drawn at random, but if you activate it during the round, you get to pick it. And that's like these sort of moments of respite where you can choose a path that is beneficial for your circumstances. Like a good example would be in Chapter 8, one of the cards is Shelob's Lair. And if you can see the Sauron player has Shelob sitting in reserve, then you know that she's going to appear in Shelob's Lair and probably won't win that path card. But if you have a chance to activate the 7th path card and then pick the 8th path card during the round, you can avoid Shelob's Lair and pick a different path. And so there's an important strategic element, as well as a nice sort of thematic justification of you choosing which way to go. And evil also can do this via Golem. Actually, that's Golem's in the Saruman deck, isn't it?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, what am I talking about? Saruman has all the monsters in his deck, and they're all played onto the path. So I don't know why I said that Saruman doesn't have many path cards. Saruman has loads of path cards. He's got the Balrog, he's got Shelob, he's got lots of
Yeah.
options. The
Just
K
making
troll
things up.
Yeah, just making things. Well, I think it's because our Saruman player in the game I played didn't actually play anything onto the path. Like, he was very obsessed with winning the battles and ignored the path to their detriment.
And lost because of it. So there was that, and so the only negative for me, shall we say, or not even a negative for me, but I've got plenty of other card games and plenty of other multiplayer card games that fulfill that same role. So I think I only rated War of the Ring as like a 7 or something. Like it's really good, but it wasn't outstanding for me. And then I got the solo expansion against the Shadow, and got a chance to play against that, and that was really good. Like it's just, you can get a game in 20-30 minutes and you get the whole feel of the whole thing against the computer or against the automata, and that really bumped it up for me with what's there. And then there's the new expansion coming, which adds effectively different factions. So, you know, Saruman would now have, you know, the shifty characters from Bree and things like that. And I think they just entirely swap out those decks. I'm not 100% sure. But
yeah, I'll have to ask the boys, actually, because they got to demo it at UKG. They played a full game with the new expansion.
The new cards, yeah. And I just think that variety is also going to be interesting, which might just push it up a little bit in one's estimation. But no, I really liked it. I enjoy the big game as well, the big War of the Ring. I think it's less.
I also enjoyed Big War of the Ring, but that is a whole day thing and only 2 player, really.
Although I think now, like, having played it a bit, it's less of an event game where it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's more like, okay, I really need to do X, Y, Z and get through. Or I need to catch you before you get to there, or I need to I'm going to sneak Frodo around the long way this time, or something like that. You know, there's a bit more game than it is spectacle. Whereas the first few games, it was very spectacle led. It's like, oh wow, playing this huge game of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So, War of the Ring, the card game. I really liked it. I had to play it again. I'm excited to play it again and bring it back to the table. I'd especially like to play it, I think, with people who get quite familiar with the cards. But I do think that familiarity with the cards will make a huge difference. And so balancing out the teams to keep it competitive will be quite important, especially if you've got new people at the table. Probably, what would you reckon is the easiest of the 4 to play? I reckon probably Aragorn.
Yeah, I mean, other than, you know, if you see Aragorn before Strider or something, you know, there's not a huge amount of things you need to really worry about in the game.
Well, it's I think just all of 2 factions, and it's largely about sort of getting armies out.
Yeah.
The one nuance of the Aragorn deck is you have a lot of cool equipment for the hobbits, and that can be a little unintuitive because you have to play them onto other people's characters, and then you need the hobbit player to actually put the hobbits into play for you to do that. But I think Saruman is probably the most difficult because Saruman's very reliant on finding certain cards, like the Palantir, well, like Saruman for a start, and Palantir and stuff. And then, yeah, maybe Mordor's the easiest. It's just one faction. It's just all Mordor all the time. But I really like it. I'm excited to play more of it. So that's War of the Ring, the card game.
What have you got for us to finish up on?
This is the big final bite, the big final chunk. So I have finally been able to get Horseless Carriage to the table. This is the latest design from Splotter, who did famously Food Chain Magnate. They've also done Antiquity, Roads and Boats, Indonesia, and Bus, as well as a number of smaller box titles that people probably have never heard of because they've never really made the mainstream. So if you know nothing about Splotter, it's 2 Dutch guys, Jeroen Duman and Joris Wiersinga, and they've set up Splotter and they've published all their own games, and they've kept it's a Splotter Spellen. It's, of course, it's Dutch. Splotter Spellen. And they've sort of had complete creative control over all of their titles almost throughout the company's history. And they've been making games since the mid-90s. Or when was Bus? I think that's their first game. I think that's mid to late 90s. They've only ever licensed out, as far as I know, they've only ever licensed out 2 games to be published outside of Splotter, which is Food Chain Magnate and Bus. Because they gave Bus to Capstone, and they gave Food Chain Magnate to Lucky Duck. Anyway, Horseless Carriage is their latest offering, and if there's one thing, just one thing that unites all of the Splotter games, it's that they're brutally ruthless, they're incredibly competitive, and you can make pretty key mistakes from the very first turn. So they're pretty savage and ruthless. Having said that, they're not all very long. Bus, I think, is incredible. I think Bus is possibly one of their best designs, if not their best design. And it's very short. Bus is like 90 minutes at most. 60 minutes if people know what they're doing. Everything else falls somewhere within that range, with I think Roads and Boats probably topping out as the most complex, and Horseless Carriage sitting somewhere around that mark as well. So this is one of their heavier things. And it's also, sadly, the last game that they're going to allow pre-orders for in the UK. Thanks to Brexit, we can now no longer pre-order Splotter games, and I'm devastated.
Well, you just have to keep your eyes open for when they're...
Well, it's hard. They're hard to find, you know, and the response to, well, how are we going to get them in the UK was find a retailer that you know who will stock it and convince them to stock it or pre-order it. Because they'll ship to retailers. They'll take retail orders. They just won't do individual pre-orders. But they've recently reprinted Indonesia, and I was looking to get my hands on a copy, and I couldn't find it. So, very sad. And to be fair, I'm not like a massive fan of Indonesia, but it's been ages, and I thought I'd give it a crack again. But anyway, I wanted to play it again. But Horseless Carriage is the car. It's the invention of the car, and you're all playing as car manufacturing companies around the first creation of the automobile. And it's a game of sort of 2 major functions. One is you've got to build a factory, which is actually like Tetris. You've got a factory floor, which is a grid. You're going to get to add extra capacity to the floor, which is more grids. And you're going to have all of these tiles that need to be placed in there. And the tiles are like factory floors where the cars will actually be produced. You've got shop fronts where the cars are going to go. And then you've got all the components that are going to be made in the factory that you have to link back up to these 2 elements, which need to be next to each other. And then you also have to find space to fit research and development in around that. And you also want to leave some space for future developments so they can be connected up correctly. It is an awfully complex tile-laying puzzle. And it's not that it's sort of super complex in understanding the rules or the exceptions about what can go where. It's complex because it's ruthless. You want to do everything. You can't possibly do everything. You don't quite know what you need to do because the second phase of the game is taking those cars that you're producing and selling them to the market. And so there's this dynamic market developing in the center of the board, and it's going to be first come, first serve to meet the demand in that market. So you want to make the big fancy cars, and then you want to sell them to the market quickly before anyone else gets in there. And oh my God, there's so much else going on in this game. Just excruciating decisions all the time. But it's one of those games that's so sort of dynamic, and the interlocking systems are so complex. It is really easy to make mistakes. Not rules mistakes, but just strategic errors because you didn't realize what was going to happen. And also, it's like quite hard to sort of visualize every outcome or even the outcomes, you know, so you're sort of making your best assessment and you're trying to get ahead of the market, trying to get ahead of the puzzle, but you don't really know what everyone else is going to do. there's this really mean thing where, like, there are these advancement boards where you can advance the car technology and its reliability, safety, speed, range, and design. And every turn you're going to produce some steps up these tracks based on the number of R&D departments who fit into your incredibly competitive factory floor space. And you can use that research and development to move other players' pieces, technically giving them a leg up, just because the more people have advanced along a single board, the more demand there is for that in the market, because the people are like, look at that shiny new car thing, and that's going to come in. So it might look like speed is going to be the next thing people want, so you're building all these speed components in your factory, and then someone uses their R&D to bump them and two friends up the R&D board, and now everyone uses their R&D to bump them and two friends up the design board, and now everyone wants new doors instead, and you've just been spending ages building brakes. It's 3 to 5 players. It scales really well at player counts because a lot of it, like all of the sort of the crunchy design element, is all simultaneous, and everything else you're super engaged with. It is complex. It's really heavy, and it's also ruthless and quite mean. To be fair, they say if you're playing for the first time, don't put in the trucks and the sports cars. Just play with cars. We put the trucks and the sports cars in immediately and played twice like that. And I won the first game because nobody built sports cars but me. And then I lost the second game because I wanted to try a different strategy, and I went competitive in on trucks, and it didn't pay off in the long run. But anyway, I've really enjoyed both plays of it. I think it's a really unique and interesting and mad game. It's like many Splotter games. The production's like,
you can say it. Ugly.
Ugly, yeah. It's ugly, and also in this case, there's some design elements that are pretty fiddly. Like if you've got issues with fine motor control, it's actually going to be quite difficult for you to play, which is a real shame.
Yeah, some of those tiles are very, very small.
There's some very small tiles. There's some really futzy marketing borders that you have to put out and then retrieve. I was very pleased to be playing it with a bunch of people who all knew how to play and could help sort of manage the flow of the rounds. It is, the kind of game where it's so complex that you want the management of the round-to-round admin, which there's not too much of, but, it is important. You want people who understand it to be helping you out rather than everyone relying on you to just run the whole game. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was also like quite significantly different to their other output. It really is like sort of, the ultimate sort of Tetris-y puzzle, because at its core, I suppose that's what it is. If only you could build the perfect factory, but there's too much else going on. You definitely can't. And so it's just filled with interesting, agonizing decisions.
It looks interesting. It doesn't look good, let's put it that way. But
Do you mean it doesn't look
they've
pretty?
jazzed it up with some very bright coloured cubes and pieces. Mm-hmm. But then the rest of it's so grey. Oh,
it's so grey. Yeah. But I think that's because the colours are really important. So they want... It's that sort of GMT school of utilitarian over attractive.
As much as we've, ripped on GMT, got nothing on Splotter.
Yeah, GMT learned everything they know from Splotter.
Yeah.
But some people do prefer that. Some people, and I'm not one of them. I don't mind a busy board if it's artistic, but I also don't have too much trouble discerning that sort of stuff. You're
a Bitoku Arboretum type guy.
Yeah. Arborea. Yeah, I'm okay with that sort of stuff. I also don't mind sparsity, actually. I suppose maybe I'm more just of a mechanically focused person, but if the game is pretty, I do enjoy that too.
Well, I will say looking at it has made me want to play Steampunk Rally. I know it's a completely different game, but just building a little car. Although, to be fair, Steampunk Rally's the next one on the chopping block. I need to play it more to see if it's worth keeping.
I've never played it.
It's a card drafting. You build up your card drafting, dice chucking game. You build up your thing that you're racing with the cards that you draft, and then hope to be able to power it to move enough spaces without blowing up or going over the wrong terrain and stuff. It's I need to play it a bit more to see whether it's worth keeping.
Well, Horseless Carriage, if everyone's across the rules, is probably... I played it at 4 both times, and we were done within 3 hours, which is, I think, really good. And it's almost no downtime, which is amazing. So I can... if you like your big, crunchy, heavy games, I can give this one a hearty thumbs up. Big recommend.
I do remember seeing it for years, just sitting on the side. Every time I came round...
I can't have been. I haven't had it for years.
I feel like it was there for I don't know.
I think that was your reaction to ISS Vanguard.
Oh, that was it.
How long have I been here?
Maybe that was it. I was just staring off into the middle distance at Horseless Carriage.
All right, that's going to bring a close to Ready Steady Podcast episode 6. Thanks everyone so much for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed the content. If you liked what you've heard, then you can always tell a friend about the show and come and check out Board Games with Barry or Ready Steady Play on YouTube. And links in the description. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.